Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyersportsbetting.com. Today is May the 12th, 2017. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now let's think out loud. You ever get caught up in the moment? Did you ever believe that in the United States, cyclist Lance Armstrong was actually clean? That former vice presidential Democratic nominee, John Edwards, had integrity and would actually make a good vice president? That in the United Kingdom, that Tony Blair's popularity would never take a hit? That Gordon Brown would make a good British Prime Minister in the U.S.? That Hillary Clinton was not only a good presidential candidate, she was unbeatable as a United States presidential candidate, right? That Brexit and Bitcoin were fads. The point is, at some time, public opinion is going to be off kilter, right? There are going to be times where conventional wisdom isn't right, where the people around you who are well-meaning, who believe that they have a grasp on reality, actually don't, right? So let's talk about this moment right now in boxing. And of course, I lost my notes, so we'll just wing it, right? Believe it or not, Anthony Joshua, a fighter with 19 pro fights, was a bigger betting favorite against Vladimir Klitschko than is Gennady Golovkin, a guy who has 17 KOs in title fights. Just title fights, is over Saul Alvarez. Right? Think about that. According to Wikipedia, and look this up, Golovkin in 387 amateur and professional fights combined has never been knocked down. Right? Forget about getting knocked out. Folks, he's never been knocked down. Right? Think about it. So, in the moment, right now, what's impacting the line is the public belief, conviction we'll call it, that Golovkin has faded based on two victories. Right? One over Kell Brook, who was unbeaten at the time that he fought Golovkin. And the other over Danny Jacobs, who had only lost once to an unbeaten Dmitry Pirog. Right? Think about it. Now here's the question, since we're thinking out loud, right? And since we're looking around and you see the betting line, you see that Golovkin is a slight favorite, even though Canelo's big fights at middleweight were against Miguel Cotto, right? Canelo weighed 155 for the fight. Cotto weighed 153.5. Look this up on boxrec.com. And of course, the fight against Amir Khan. Wow, did Khan have another fight at middleweight? Well, let's just think it through and let's be hardcore here and ask a question that's not being asked in public. Right? And that question is, if Canelo were to have fought Kell Brook and Danny Jacobs, YouTube Nation, tell me in the comment section to this video, whether he, in your opinion, would beat both of them. Right? He wouldn't even have to look as good as Golovkin, right? Golovkin's getting dissed here. Golovkin, of course, fractured Kell Brook's eye socket, right? And dropped Danny Jacobs. Didn't get dropped in the match. Right? Canelo wouldn't have to fracture an eye socket or drop either guy, right? He would just have to beat both. Right? YouTube Nation, you tell me. Let's make this video about your views. You tell me whether Canelo would beat both of those guys. Because if he can't, then how could people use Golovkin's performance in those two fights to dumb down the line to where one of history's longest reigning middleweight champions is somehow a slim favorite over a guy who has barely fought at the middleweight division, right? Cotto, I know Cotto was a middleweight champion, right? Understood. Let's face it, Cotto's reign involves catch weights, doesn't it? Right? To the fighters, hey, if you're going to fight at catch weights, we're going to call it out. Right? We're just recognizing what was. We're just recognizing the facts you put into play. Right? Cotto fought at middleweight at catch weights, and then you have Amir Khan, who, in my opinion, right, and Teddy Atlas has this opinion, was dominating his fight against Canelo before he got stopped. Now let's talk about two fights. Right? Let's talk about Canelo, Kell Brook, and let's talk about the possibility of Canelo against Danny Jacobs. Now, Canelo, Kell Brook, and I know many of you are saying, but Dwyer, you're taking Errol Spence over Kell Brook in Kell Brook's next fight. True, but against Canelo, wouldn't Kell Brook just be too fast? Somebody tell me how Canelo would beat Kell Brook in the comment section to this video. Right? Kell Brook is a guy who beat Shawn Porter. Right? Wouldn't Kell Brook have too much foot speed? Wouldn't Kell Brook have too much hand speed? Wouldn't Kell Brook simply have too much for Saul Alvarez? Right? Understand too, and I know this is controversial, but Kell Brook is much harder to find in the ring, at least in my opinion, than is Amir Khan. I know many of you are going to say, hey, Khan has hand speed, right? Yeah, that's fine, but Khan's head isn't the most mobile head on his shoulders that I've seen in the sport of boxing, right? Kell Brook is very hard to hit flush. He's very hard to hit flush. You really have to be a fighter who's hyper-aggressive on your front foot. Carson Jones, the first fight. Shawn Porter tried to be hyper-aggressive against Kell Brook. You really have to be able to move. You really have to be able to pin Kell Brook. Does Canelo have that kind of foot speed? Now, I know Kell Brook's been fighting at 147. You and I and Kell Brook's family knows that that's a strain for him. He should be fighting regularly, in my opinion, at 160 pounds. Right? Wasn't he up in the mid-170s in the month before the Golovkin fight? So if Kell Brook ever, and keep in mind, Golovkin beats an unbeaten Kell Brook, right? If Kell Brook ever signs to face Canelo, I would take Kell Brook in that match as long as it's not at 147, where in my opinion Kell Brook would lose to Errol Spence, right? Let's talk about Danny Jacobs. Oh my goodness. Here's another guy with a long resume. Folks, a long resume. at middleweight. Let's think about Canelo's punches, right? Canelo doesn't shift to southpaw. Danny Jacobs, with more height, with more size, with more experience, does. Right? If you thought Danny Jacobs gave Golovkin a problem shifting to southpaw, just imagine what he would do with Canelo. Right? Golovkin moves better in the ring than Canelo. If you disagree, state it in the comment section to this video. Right? But just understand, Danny Jacobs, physically bigger than Canelo. Jacobs has a punch himself. Don't believe me? Just ask Kid Chocolate, Peter Quillen. Right? Jacobs has a punch. You don't think Danny Jacobs gives Canelo all he could handle? If Danny Jacobs stays outside, Jacobs has a jab. If Jacobs is throwing a jab and Jacobs shifts to southpaw and neutralizes Canelo's jab, right? Given that Jacobs has been in the ring with heavy punchers, Kid Chocolate, Golovkin, right? Survived both fights, goes the distance with Golovkin, snaps Golovkin's knockout streak, right? Given that Jacobs is a survivor, is there anyone watching this video who is certain that Saul Alvarez would beat Danny Jacobs? Right? So I believe in the moment here. Right? This is almost like the people who laughed at the Brexit movement. Right? In the moment, we're getting a bit carried away. Yes, Saul Alvarez at 164 beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who was as drained at 164 as Kell Brook's going to look, in my opinion, at 147. Right? Keep in mind, too, Chavez Jr. one fight in the preceding 16 months. They asked Bob Arum about a possible fight between his fighter, Gilberto Ramirez, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and Bob thought it was a joke. Right? Don't you feel, too? Let's be real here. Don't you feel, too, that Kell Brook and Danny Jacobs would give Canelo a much tougher fight than Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? Who do you think would win between Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Golovkin? Right? So, is it possible that the public here is looking at Golovkin against two very rough opponents? Right? An unbeaten Kell Brook and a once beaten Danny Jacobs. Right? Where was that Jacobs fight? Wasn't it in Jacobs' backyard? Isn't Jacobs a New Yorker? Wasn't that fight in New York? And the public, of course, is looking at two wins. Two wins. And they're feeling that Golovkin is past his prime. It's simply astonishing. Right? Which fighter at middleweight would do as well against those two guys? Right? Are you even certain that Canelo beats either of them? I'm not. So, as promised, I'm going to throw this out to the floor here. I'm going to end this video here. Right? What I want the people watching this video to think about, since Golovkin is going off at less than a 2-to-1 favorite. Think about it. Less than a 2-to-1 favorite in a fight at middleweight against a guy who, if you look at his record, and I know Canelo walks around much heavier, right? He's a much heavier guy. But Canelo has, what, one fight where his opponent was officially above 160 pounds. Right? One fight. That's the Chavez Jr. fight. Right? By the way, that's the only fight where an opponent has been 160 against Canelo at the weigh-in. Right? Think it through. Let's at least admit that Golovkin has been hit by more middleweights in his career and has taken their punch than has Canelo. By the way, Golovkin has taken the punch to such an extent that I'm sure a sizable number of the 387 amateur and pro bouts he's been in were at middleweight. Right? So, isn't this line a bit depressed? Isn't the casino offering you an incredible deal here wherever the fight is? Wherever the fight is. It could be at Staples in Southern California. It could be at Jerry Jones's Taj Mahal in Texas. Right? Just like the Kell Brook fight was in the UK. And Golovkin won. Let me just say, knockout punches travel well, don't they? If you want to take it away from the crowd, knock the guy down, which is what Golovkin does better than just about anybody. Folks, look at his knockout percentage. Right? Think it through. So the line here is a deal. We're criticizing a fighter for taking on challenging opposition, right? And in both fights, right? Getting a stoppage in one, knocking the guy down in the other, right? A feat few could do. A feat we're not even sure if his opponent can do. But yet the casino is giving his opponent a lot of love, right? The casino is literally giving his opponent more love than it gave Vladimir Klitschko when the odds posted for the Klitschko-Anthony Joshua fight, right? Klitschko goes off at something like a 2-to-1 underdog. You're getting shorter odds than that right now on Canelo against one of boxing's most dominant champions. Right? So, let me hear from you. I'll be reading the comment section as I always do. Curious to see how many of you feel that Canelo would beat both Kell Brook. Right? In fact, let's break it down. Kell Brook at 160. Isn't that who Golovkin beat? Right? That Canelo would beat Kell Brook at 160. And would beat Danny Jacobs at 160. I don't think he would. I think there's a reason why. Oscar De La Hoya looked at this fight and then said, hey, we'll fight you next year in the fall. Right? Think about it. Right? For what? So Canelo could have legacy-making fights like his fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? Come on, man. Right? It's not like Canelo spent that time fighting guys on boxing's Mount Rushmore. Right? I didn't see Canelo hop in the ring with Keith Thurman or big names like that. So, I'm taking Golovkin, as I've said numerous times here online. I can't understand why the public now is questioning him. I don't understand these odds. If Anthony Joshua is going off at a minus 250 over Vladimir Klitschko, Golovkin should be getting at least that much. At least that much against Canelo. Also, think this through. Talk about double standards. Danny Jacobs goes the distance. Think about it. Goes the distance on Golovkin, and people are saying, oh, Lordy, Golovkin's faded. It's over for Gennady Golovkin. Right? I haven't heard one person say that yet, and we just saw Chavez Jr. go the distance against Canelo. Right? In fact, look closely at Canelo's record. Right? Cotto goes the distance against him. Erislandy Lara goes the distance against him. Austin Trout goes the distance against him. And yet the line is this close. So I like Golovkin. Let me hear from the Canelo crowd, right? If you feel any of the 4 fighters are overrated, right? Golovkin, Canelo, Kell Brook, Danny Jacobs. If you feel any of those fighters are overrated, I hope you leave those comments in the comment section to this video. And if you feel any of those 4 fighters would lose to Chavez Jr., then I hope you leave those comments in the comment section to this video. Right? In a sentence, I feel Golovkin is getting dissed for fighting superior opposition and beating superior opposition. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section. Thanks for stopping by.